Hello, music enthusiasts. For the next 4 picks, or a full round of the Sonic Collective, we're going with something called Common Threads. Each of us will pick 3 albums where there is something, or perhaps a variety of things, that create some sort of common thread running through their 3 picks. Generally in a month, we listen to 1 album many times, but this time we'll have 3 albums to listen to in the month, with the challenge to listen to each of them at least once. Then at the end of the month, we'll do a review of sorts where we discuss possibly what the threads are, how they work together, and then generally really just dive into how we feel about each of those 3 albums. So we hope you enjoy this twist on our usual monthly take and see if you can find the common threads. Welcome back, music lovers. This month is the second installment of our Common Threads round, where we choose 3 albums that ideally have some sort of connection. Could be something just interesting, quirky, who knows? But we listen to these 3 albums, we kind of review and rate the albums as their own, and then we try and figure out what are those common threads between them. I must say these 3 albums were just albums that were sort of on my radar the last while. I keep going back to lists of albums I should maybe pick, and as I started to think about these 3, I started to look at the history of them, where they were made, certain other things. I started to see some connections between them. So this month, we're looking at Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath, which came out in 1970. The Stone Roses by the Stone Roses, which came out in 1989, and Permission to Land by The Darkness, that came out in 2003. Without getting any more into it, we're going to throw to individuals to chat about what they thought about the albums, give them a rating, and then I think we'll circle around back again to see if we can find any common threads. So why don't we kick it off by going to Darren?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I was just telling the guys before we started the show, I really liked our last one. And so I'm excited to get into this one. And I'm a little worried I'm not sure of the connection. But anyway, I'll dive in. So out of these 3 albums, one I already knew and I really loved. One really surprised me and I became a big fan. And one I thought I was going to love and I fucking hated it. So I'll start in order to the one I loved and I already had, and that's Black Sabbath. So, that is a very classic album. I got to admit, I wasn't into it in my youth. I don't think I was ready to understand Black Sabbath, especially that first album. It was probably Black Sabbath 3. I remember kind of more in the 80s, late 70s, that was kind of resonating at those times. But anyway, this album, I did get it recently actually from my sister's longtime partner, Jamie, and he was a great guy, and he gave me this album, and he just said, "Hey, can you just take it back and record it for me? Because I have nowhere to play it, because he doesn't have a record player." So anyway, long story short, this is known as really the invention of heavy metal. Tommy Iommi, and Ozzy Osbourne, Bill Ward on drums, and, what's his name? I forget the bass players right now. Anybody remember? Anyway, that's okay. It'll come back to me.
Geezer Butler.
Thank you. Jeez, I should have wrote that down. I was like, I'll just remember. I know them. Idiot. So, and also known, especially the Black Sabbath song, is really the first doom metal song, and really just metal in general. And at times it almost seems like a bit Led Zeppelin bluesy, but it's just cool, and it's so different for its time, and it's just known for that. It's a classic album. I freaking loved it. I don't have to say much more about that. Tom Iommi, he chopped the ends of his fingers off. So in his last day at work in a sheet metal factory, and I'm sure all the other guys would have said that. I just happened to go first, but, and imagine that last day at work and you chop them off. Yeah. So he does this, and he has to learn to play guitar with the missing fingertips. So that's why he got this sound, because he had to adapt his guitar. So, there's long stories on that, but I'm just covering that. I love that it's actually only 5 songs, which is cool, but actually there's 2 songs that are kind of 3 songs in one, which is neat, but, great album. Love it. For me, 4.5 out of 5 on that one. Love it. Okay. My next album, the one that surprised me, is The Darkness. I remember this album well. And, you know, that song was everywhere at the time. I was actually quite surprised how old it was. For some reason in my head, I'm like, oh, that's like 10 years old, but it was like 2003. So I was like, shit, that was like almost 20 years ago here, like next year. That part really surprised me, but I remember it, but I can't say I probably listened to the whole album that much then. Probably heard a few hits, thought he was catchy, like the voice is awesome. But anyway, I get into this album and I kind of know what to get into, and it was just so fun. I just thought that album was super fun. And that literally is what that band was known for. They were selling out massive halls in the UK way before they had an album deal, and nobody knew who they were, but they just performed so good live. You can imagine how fun those guys would be live, especially that was their first album. Those would have been the songs they were playing. It's just awesome. Like it reminded me of like, there's a bit of 80s hair metal in there and almost 80s hair metal prog, which is like, if you remember Dokken or Queensryche, is that Queensryche? And like some proggy 80s kind of metalish bands is in there, but just in their own twist. And it was so fun, man. I loved it. I mean, I think it's like fans love it, and you see them live, you love them. Critics, I don't think really like them. Like, Love on the Rocks with no ice, like hilarious. It almost reminded me, we did Ron Gallo once and talked about him, and I actually really think he's a brilliant musician, but it's kind of almost comedic and, rock. I don't know even what else you would call that, performance rock. Anyway, for me, Darkness, super fun. I'll give that one a 3.75 out of 5. Just love that album. Okay, the one I hated, and I know it's a classic. And years ago, I tried to listen to it, the Stone Roses. I remember when it came out, it was really popular. And I remember just thinking, it's kind of slow. I'm not really vibing it. But I thought, yeah, maybe I always thought I'd come back. I almost bought that album about 5 times going, this is a classic. I'm sure I would love it. Thank fucking Christ I didn't. I was just like, Jesus, fuck. Like, hey, I'll give it to him. I Want to Be Adored. That's a really good song. And they do have some individual songs I liked after. They became quite poppy, really after this album. And I was actually also surprised in that one that was 89, because they were out quite a bit, I guess, with an album before the Oasis and kind of the Next Generation kind of came out of that, kind of UK scene at that time. So they were probably a bit of an influence, and, kind of sounds like the Beatles a little bit. But the one thing that I really struggled with is like, what the fuck is Ian Brown saying? Like, I don't know if it was just a Spotify mix. I tried it on YouTube and a few other things, but like, and maybe I'm 52, maybe my ears are just losing that range of annoying singing, and maybe that's not him. It's a production staff, whoever mixed this album. Cause I just found like the vocals were so almost the same volume as the guitars, and it really competed for me. I just really had trouble listening to it. I'm like, cause I'm trying to review the album, trying to listen to the words, and I'm like, what the fuck is Ian Brown saying? So anyway, not a big fan, of that album at all. And I've always said I'm not into the kind of mellow stuff. So great album. And I remember Alan Cross, a hero of me, a rock kind of reporter and historian here in Canada and internationally well known. But I remember he said once that if he could only take 10 albums to a beach, then that was on it. And I'm like, fuck, if Alan Cross likes it, I must like it. But sorry, Alan, I'm not with you on that one. Anyway, for me, like, honestly, that's like, I Want to Be Adored, and I appreciate what they did, but it's 2. Like, that's it for me. Yeah. All right. I've rambled on long enough. Scott Gregory, how about you?
Yeah. So, I'm going to go in reverse order and go from the one I like the least up to the one that I like the most. And surprisingly, well, maybe not surprising if you know me, I didn't really enjoy Black Sabbath that much. It's a 4-piece band if you include Ozzy's tambourine. And, it was the hardest of all the albums rock-wise. Ozzy's got his patented vocals, not a breath of harmony anywhere on it. You already alluded to the distinctive guitar sound on there from Tommy and his missing fingers / dish soap fingers and swapping out the guitar on there. And yeah, I did detect a little bit of bluesiness to it as well too. But I don't know. Like, I understand it's the first out the door when it comes to that level of metal and that, but it just feels like nursery rhymey to me, right? Like, you could be Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown. Jill came tumbling after, right? Like,
They did.
Like,
they
I'm sure
did.
that's the B cut.
Yeah, they did only record that album in 12 hours. Isn't that crazy?
Yes. And then they played a gig afterwards, I think. Is that in there or
Right.
something like that?
Yeah.
They had 2 days scheduled for it, and one was for mixing or something like that. And they just had him in a separate room. And you know what? I get into that a little bit later. But all of these bands you mentioned as far as the live shows, and that's one thing that I can respect for them, is that I did go and check out how these guys play live versus how they play in the studio. And I don't know if I've mentioned it in the podcast before, but I really appreciate that about artists. And so I'll give that to them. Is that a band that can crank out in the studio and replicate it really well without a lot of technology on stage, and vice versa? I really enjoy that. So props to them on that front. I did like The Wizard. It's a nice harmonica powered bluesy kind of power jam to it. And Wicked World seemed to be the song I feel they put the most effort into, for lack of a better way of putting it, right? Like Ozzy's vocals are a little more coherent in there, a little harder edge to them than maybe, once he could afford more alcohol and drugs, what he wound up later, really sharper tone to his voice. So I really want to give it a 2 out of 5, but like I said, it's the first out of the door, so I'll give it a 3 out of 5. I just think, if I had to choose between this album or like a Tool album, listen to, Vicariously, or to listen to like Churub Rock, or Siamese Twins, or another album, from later on, from another band that does it a little better, I'm just not a Sabbath fan. But 3 out of 5. A little respect to the king on that. The Darkness, I really liked it. He's got a big voice, Justin Hawkins, really big voice, had this really big stadium rock feel to it. Like you could feel that they had come out of the streets and off the stage, and that recording was the next thing for them, not the first thing, right? Just lots of banging power chords on it. It's jangle pop, which I like, but there's like some bluesy jams on there too. I can't believe it was 20 years ago either, and that it was like 10 albums ago kind of deal. Like they were cranking out an album every 2 years kind of thing. So like, I don't really know a lot about them after that first album. So that was intriguing to me. I thought, when I was reading them a little bit, one of the most interesting things I saw, and this is true of all of these bands, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but on this one, the critics didn't really like them. The studios didn't really like them before anyone signed them, right? They were a little under the radio, to the point where even when the album came out, Classic Rock, I love this quote: "Permission to Land will never be the album that the darkness thinks it is," decided Classic Rock. "But taken in the spirit that it is offered, it's certainly more fun than Use Your Illusion." I would just like to say in response, fuck you, Classic Rock. Use Your Illusion 2 is one of the greatest rock albums ever made. I will listen to it all day, every day, and never get tired of it. So, and fuck you too, Scott. I see those thumbs. So yeah, A Thing Called Love, obviously great guitar song. The huge falsettos on that. And then the other song, Get Your Hands Off My Woman. Love both those songs. It's just fun. I know Alan's a big fan of Steel Panther. This group really reminds me of them, only they probably made a lot more money. 4 out of 5 on this one for me. And finally, the Stone Roses. I'm the complete opposite of you, Darren. I love this thing. It was mellow. It was subdued. I don't know why. I knew of them, but I just never checked them out. And I was just, like floored when I listened to this thing. And maybe it's just where I am now compared to before. I can see why Oasis, you mentioned them coming forward. They were talking about both of the Gallagher brothers saw them live, and they were the band that convinced them to become a group to pursue music and form a band. So, very smart of you to bring them up. And I love Oasis too, right? So just being able to draw that line back to them and be like, why did this never happen? It is really reverby on the vocals and kind of subdued. You know what it reminded me of? Do you remember like in 2014 when Beck just went on this almost folk rocky kind of atmospheric mellow run, so that by the time 2017 came around, I think it was Morning Phase in 2014, and then 2017 was Colors. If you listen to 2017 Colors by Beck, it's almost identical as far as just the shape of this album. So go and check that out. I enjoyed that album too, by the way. So, but yeah, it's almost like sometime around 2013, Beck listened to the Stone Roses by the Stone Roses, and he's like, that's what I want to do for the rest of my career. Yeah, Elizabeth, My Dear is the most beautiful death threat to the Queen that I've ever heard. Sugar Spun Sister, it was the song on the album that I thought really opened up the guitar. You know, it had the most teeth to it, and so I really appreciated it for that. There was a little bit of edge to that song. And then Fool's Gold closes the album, and that was a really odd song out to me. And it had that really catchy drum beat and reminded me of Connected by Stereo MC. And I really like that song as well, too. So, yeah, overall, I think I enjoyed the Stone Roses album the most, which is strange because I knew the singles from The Darkness, and Ozzy, you're just supposed to like him. So the fact that the Stone Roses came in as an unknown for me really blew me away. I'm going to immerse myself deeply in their 2-album discography and really do the deep dive. 5 out of 5. Alan, what did you think?
All right. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, in no particular order, I'll start with Black Sabbath. I've never listened to this album before, so I was kind of, I guess, not sure quite what to expect. You always hear about Sabbath being called the godfathers of heavy metal, so I guess I sort of figured it was going to be a little more heavy and like grungy and dark. I guess it was dark thematically, but I was pleasantly surprised at how bluesy it came across. I mean, Ozzy was playing the harmonica. I think there were a couple other sort of like blues, really like blues centric instruments used on the album as well, which is really cool. Yeah, so you could really hear that bluesy influence. However, it did still have that sort of like English take on the genre, a la Led Zeppelin. For me anyway, there was a lot of similarities between early Sabbath and sort of like mid-career Led Zeppelin with the regards to the blues influence. Shout out to the Devil's Trichord that kicks off the opening track, Black Sabbath. If memory serves, I think those chords used to be banned by the church because they were, quote, evil.
Yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah. And Scott Gregory, I will echo your point about the whole nursery rhymey sound there. I did notice there was a bit of a simplicity to some of the songwriting. It did seem a little basic and formulaic, but I'm willing to give them a pass on that because after all, this was the debut album. And I found it interesting that I could kind of hear the rumblings of like where they were going as a band, even from the start. And despite the bluesiness, because I believe their next album, well, I guess all subsequent albums were decidedly less bluesy. I think they kind of really leaned into that dark sort of metal thing. Anyway, I didn't love this album. I didn't hate it. I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5. Much respect to Sabbath for being influential. This album itself didn't necessarily resonate super hard with me. Next on my list, just again in order of how I made my notes, I have the Stone Roses album. This is, of course, the self-titled debut album for the Stone Roses. I'll be honest, guys, I never heard of this band before, so I didn't really know what I was getting into. And the first time I listened through, I kind of felt like a lot of these songs would be at home in a John Hughes movie from the 80s. You know what I mean? Like there's that sonically, I think it's just kind of firmly planted in that mid to late 80s sort of sound. Sorry, guys, I just punched my mic. I'm talking with my hands. But I did find all of the songs very catchy. And here's actually an odd case in point for how catchy and memorable their music is. I distinctly remember being in high school, hanging out in the music room before class one morning, and there was a kid there playing a really catchy bass line. And I remember thinking to myself, like, damn, that sounds really cool. But I had a rivalry with this guy for whatever reason, so I was also very annoyed at how good and cool and catchy that bass line was. And I just assumed he made it up. So like for all of these years, I assumed that he just made up that riff and it was sick. And I have now recently come to learn that he was actually playing the bass line to the Stone Roses song, She Bangs the Drums. So like, you know, it's a memorable tune. I don't know. Anyway, for me, I guess these guys are somewhat famous for creating the groundwork that would be known as Britpop, as Darren alluded to. And they're also famous for creating or being fundamental to the quote Manchester scene, which I guess was like sort of like indie rock, rave inspired, like very, I don't know, everyone was like doing MDMA or something. And I think that kind of carries through in their songwriting to an extent. I mean, I don't know. I found the album, like, even though the album itself, like beats per minute, like not all the songs were like upbeat, fast paced or whatever, but I found that they were generally upbeat in tone, which was nice, especially as background noise. Like if you're working and listening to this album, I did appreciate the vocal harmonies. The reverby effects on the vocals didn't bug me that much because it's just one of those characteristics that kind of like supplants this album in that time frame. Like that seems to be an instrument or a technique of production that these 80s bands employed. So, you know, I'll give it a pass on that. The guitars sounded pretty crisp though. The bass lines were bouncy. The drums had really good clarity. So I think it all kind of just worked together. And one thing I really appreciated from this album was how occasionally they do this weird, funky psychedelic stuff. Yeah, I think it would probably pair pretty well with some weed, wouldn't it, Darren? He probably
It didn't. It did not. No,
there you go.
It's not a bad album. It's just not my thing. It's not my thing.
Yeah. I mean, all in all, I found it to be pretty good zone out music. I didn't pay too much attention to the lyrical content. So for all I know, they were like, apparently they were threatening the Queen or something. That was lost on me, but I enjoyed the album, and it actually ended up being my favorite of the three. So I'm giving it a 3.75 out of 5. And last but not least, we have The Darkness, Permission to Land, also a debut album. The Darkness is perhaps best known for, I believe, in a thing called Love, which, by the way, is a karaoke staple of mine. And I've also done Get Your Hands Off of My Woman, but the bars don't like that because of all the curse words. Anyway, great song. And if you know those songs, that's kind of like that level sets your expectation for the rest of the album. Like it's just rock. It's powerful, high-driven vocals. The guitar solos are pretty great. I mean, the tunes are catchy. This is another feel-good album, and I really don't know how you could be in a bad mood after listening to it. You know, Darren kind of mentioned already that people wrongly assume that The Darkness is a gimmicky band. I guess they were a gimmicky band, whether or not they were trying to, but the truth is they're all incredibly talented musicians, and I think they put together a pretty great album. It's definitely like inspired by that 80s hard rock scene. Not quite the ripoff of the genre that Steel Panther is, as Scott kind of mentioned. Great band as well. But it's certainly iterative to that genre, which is okay. I think the result is a pretty unique take on it. It's a catchy album, and I definitely recommend it, especially if you're grumpy. And just before I end with my score here, I should mention that I bought tickets to The Darkness when they came to Calgary back in March, and I got COVID the day of the show, so I missed it, and it made me very sad. I missed out on that opportunity. So if they ever come back, hopefully I get to catch it. Anyway, this album gets a 3.5 out of 5 from me. I think it was a pretty solid album. Not the best album I've ever listened to, but it is A-okay by me.
Hey guys, thanks. I've really enjoyed listening to what you thought of all of these. And I always love how some of us will love an album and others will absolutely hate an album. Fantastic. So yeah, I'll just start no particular order either, but Black Sabbath. I mean, this one, I always try and remember. I think I heard about this on some podcast, but what people thought when they heard that first track, Black Sabbath, right? Because this is regarded as being the first heavy metal album, period. And apparently some people literally like almost lost their minds when they heard that first song. They were terrified. They were scared. They didn't know what it was. And I just, now we've heard so many different musical styles that I don't think we'll ever be shocked quite as much by some music. But apparently that opening track really, truly frightened and confused.
Oh, Kanye is pretty good at saying some
I
shocking
don't know
shit.
what anyone does. But I mean, just imagine hearing, I think it's such a neat sound that inspired me. What's weird is I knew of Black Sabbath. And of course I knew not Iron Man, but what's it called? Is it Iron Man? It's off their second album. But War Pigs, right? I knew a few of their songs, but I'd say it's only in the last 12 months that I've listened to their first and second albums. And I don't know how they fell off my radar. So I do agree with you guys. Like, it's very Zeppelinish. And I looked, and Zeppelin 3 came out the same year in 70. So there's a lot of similar overtones happening. There are a lot of blues, which I quite like. I think it's neat how the first track is so dark and blazing new trails. And they must have almost deliberately thought, we're going to try and scare the shit out of everyone and make a huge wave with the first track. But then as it eases in, and then the last track, I mean, it is kind of a rock blues. I almost kind of think of Cream a little bit in Zeppelin, but yeah, I won't go into too many details beyond that. And I really enjoyed it. And I love Sabbath's second album now. And also you realize how many rap bands have sampled Sabbath over the years. And I heard an interview with Ice-T, and he says basically his main influence for ever getting into rock is Black Sabbath as well. So I love that album. I'm more into it now. I'm going to listen to more Sabbath. The Darkness, I only knew the one single that you mentioned, Alan. And this album just puts a smile on my face every time I hear it. Like, I mean, this is just fun for fun rock's sake. That's it. And I've since learned that they love Queen and they love AC/DC, and I love both those bands. And you watch how Justin Hawkins dresses in like jumpsuits with the chest cut out. And recently he sang at the Taylor Hawkins tribute concerts. And that guy might have the best vocals in rock at the moment. Like, his range is unbelievable. And I just think it's so goddamn fun. The whole album, from like Get Your Hands Off My Woman, which is absolutely just ridiculous in every sense of the word, to Black Shuck at the start and Stuck in a Rut, and yeah, they're just, if you're looking for just some mindless fun, stomp your foot, drink a beer rock, I really think they absolutely nailed it. And it's going to drive me to go down the Darkness's catalog a bit more, because I think there is more than that single. But I agree with you, Alan, is that single is the high bar by far. Like, the other songs are all good, but they don't quite hit that one. And in a sense, it's sort of like the peak of an entire career in your first single, and nothing else quite measures up. I've started to watch his YouTube channel a bit, Justin Hawkins Rides Again, which I think is quite funny. He does some great commentary. So I really enjoyed that one too. Stone Roses, I knew Fool's Gold, and I was surprised when I listened to this one how many songs I'd actually heard over the years, but I just didn't really register. But I'd say half of this album must have been singles, right? Like, this is steeped in singles. I enjoyed it. It is the kickoffs of sort of shoegaze and the Manchester sound, as I understand it. So they did kind of kick off that sound of, I think somebody, maybe it was Alan, alluded to like drugs. This is, to me, definitely an album to probably smoke some weed to or do other stuff. I can kind of see how it's fun for me, the album, but you could see depressed people laying on their bed just being depressed. So it kind of straddles two zones for me. It's such a unique sound. And while I like the album, I feel like it could just be like 10 minutes shorter. And while I like it, I also find it's a bit of a one-trick pony, is that it is such a similar sound. I'm hard-pressed to really name too many songs that one versus the other, or how one really stuck out. But I really enjoyed it. So how I'll rate them, though, the Sabbath I'll give a 4.5, because I just think for what it was and the time period, it's legendary. Stone Roses I'll give 3.5, and Permission to Land I'll give a 4. So let's go back in the order that we first shared and find out what all of you think the common threads are on these. Darren, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I struggled. I mentioned it when I started talking in the beginning about the albums, and I really did. I mean, really, a lot came up, and actually, your spiel right there, you just killed about 5 of my theories. So I'm like, because you're talking so casually about them, I'm thinking that's probably not the connection. But I was deep at one point. I'm like, okay, Peter Hook from New Order with Joy Division, he worked on the Stone Roses, and he must like. And then that Justin Hawkins Rides Again, and like I was like, oh man, I was all over the place. I also thought they all were albums that the critics panned, but I'm not sure that's it. They're obviously all British. All the albums are under 48 minutes, and I know we like that, but then you commented it was a bit longer, so now I'm like, that's not that. And then I was like, Ozzy Osbourne's got a new album that Justin Hawkins is going to be on, Patient Number 9, that is new, and I'm trying to find that. Anyway, long story short, I don't know. You know what? I'm going to answer that they were all arrested strangely.
Wow,
And
you've come up with a
that's
few, and you've also come up with a few that I never thought of. Well done. Scott Gregory.
Like you said, they're all British. These are all their first albums. Again, if you count Ozzy's Tambourine, they're all guitar-driven 4-piece rock bands. They're all from the seedy side of rock. Like they were all either alt or heavy metal, like creating a new genre kind of thing. And like you said, these bands did receive mixed reviews from either critics or record labels early on, but then the albums just slapped it on the charts with fans afterwards, right? And in retrospect, some of them are top 10 albums all time, let alone top 500 kind of list, right? I'm going to go with, though, what I had mentioned earlier, that all these bands bubbled up out of just what were strong live bands before they ever got into the studio. And that really comes through on these albums. And again, I can't stress how much that I appreciate that if a band can recreate both in the studio and on the stage, something that's similar, and you get your $15 worth out of the album, or your these days $300 worth in the stadium, that's good to me. So that's what I'm going to go with. Strong live bands that
hey, you're on the right track too, Scott. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Scott. That's insightful. I had kind of along the same lines. I wrote down that the albums were all debut albums by British bands, and that they had all charted in the top 10 in the UK. And that's as far as I managed to really scrape. But I like the fact that Scott said they're all, live bands that applied their craft to the studio.
Good.
That's
well,
cool.
Great. I'm glad to hear you picked up on a lot of them. And I didn't go as deep. Like, I got to admit, so this could be a lot of fun if you found something like on the first one Darren did. I thought maybe the same guitar was used on them. These, I don't go nearly as deep. And you've mentioned pretty much all of them. Yeah, they're all British bands. They're all debut albums. They're all four-piece bands. One you missed out on is they were all recorded in London. Another one you all sort of mentioned is that they've become more respected with time. I don't think any of them blew the critics or amazed the critics, blew them out of the water at the beginning, but they've probably become very respected over time. And Scott, you mentioned it. Yeah, I agree. I thought they all kind of sound live. Like when I hear these, I'm like, I've heard live recordings and they do all kind of sound like live recordings of a band. Also, I think they all kind of broke new ground in rock to an extent, and this might be a bit of a stretch, but Black Sabbath, first heavy metal. I mentioned shoegaze Manchester sound was the Stone Roses. And while the Darkness isn't a brand new sound, I think they kind of in an era where you had Jay-Z at the top of the charts and Linkin Park and stuff, they sort of brought just fun, almost glam rock to the forefront again. Another one I put here is that they're just intricate covers and they're from 3 different decades. So there's a bit of a reach on some of them, but I think we found most of the common threads with them. And I'm glad that for the most part, whether we liked or disliked the albums, we all, I think, enjoyed the experience of them. So thanks for playing along and listening to these albums this month. And who is it next month?
I'm going to jump the queue. So I'm getting in front of Alan here. I bribed him with a bottle of scotch. I'm just too excited.
Sweet. Looking forward to it. So thank you, music fans, for listening to hopefully the albums and listening to this review. Check it out. In a few days, we'll have Scott Gregory's pick up. And for November, you can enjoy 3 different albums and try and figure out what the common threads are. Until then, happy listening.